Hardtalk is on the road in Australia, a country enjoying a golden era of prosperity. And you can feel that here on the streets of the financial centre, Sydney, with all of the new building, the deal making and the conspicuous consumption. How come? Well, much of it rests on two key pillars. Wealth being generated thousands of miles from here. It's all about Australia's mineral riches and the insatiable desire of Asian economies for those riches. It adds up to a resources boom. But just how sustainable is that? When it comes to mining, size definitely matters. Within a decade, this will be one of the world's biggest mines. They call it sino-iron. In the remote northwest corner of Australia, a state-owned Chinese company is pouring billions of dollars into a minerals operation which defies all human scale. Over the course of the next 2 decades, up to 6 billion tons of magnetite iron ore will be stripped from the earth and shipped to China. Eventually, the open pit will reach 200 meters below sea level. The heavy machinery already in place to shift the rock is the biggest ever made. The Chinese mine operator has built a vast processing plant, a power station, a port and a fleet of special ships to ensure a 24/7, year-round supply of iron ore for China's steel mills. Here's graphic evidence of the degree to which China's economic power is reshaping Australia. The world's second largest economy has an unquenchable appetite for resources. Australia has become Beijing's quarry of choice. Western Australia is a vast territory. To enter mining country, you have to fly hundreds of miles into the bush. But this is no empty land. It has a long history. A series of dirt roads took me deep into the territory of the Wurundjeri Aboriginal people.
This is the Wurundjeri country, this is Walgana Rock.
Colin Hamlet is an elder of the tribe. He wanted to show me his ancestral home, a land of songlines and sacred places. This is Walgana, for millennia a meeting place for Aboriginal peoples. Colin, tell me about this amazing piece of rock.
This amazing piece of rock that shows you the emu's feet here.
That's an emu's foot, is it?
Yeah, there's two. We walk this way.
Yeah.
And there's a hand there.
Up here.
Yeah.
And it keeps going.
It keeps going all along.
Is it, as we walk along it, is it actually telling a story, do you think?
But if you can read the story, that's telling you a story. It tells you about travels, where people travelled and things like that, and where they stayed.
Can you read it?
Oh, some of it I can read, but I can't read it all.
Are there messages in here from your ancestors to you?
Telling people, not unto me, but to Wurundjeri people as a whole that come here. If they can read the signs, then they will understand what it's all about.
And those are messages that have lasted for thousands of years?
Thousands of years. I've got no idea how long they've been there.
How do you, it's a very special place. How do you feel as you see it?
I feel very proud to be a part of this.
A short drive from Walgana, a line of hills known as the Weld Range rises from the plateau. A ridge of rock rich in iron ore and ripe for mining. The right to strip out up to 300 million tons of ore from these hills is in the hands of another Chinese company, Sino Steel. But they can't do it without the agreement of traditional landholders like Colin Hamlet, whose great-grandmother lies buried in these hills.
My worries are about specific areas that we don't want to touch, and they keep wanting to do it, you know. That's the worry for me.
Isn't part of the worry for you as one community leader that there are other elements in your community who disagree with you, who actually want, in this case, Sino Steel, to go ahead with the project and to improve the economy of the area as quickly as possible?
Yeah, that happens throughout WA, everybody, you know. There's divisions between Aboriginal people, and these are sort of things that create these divisions.
Of course, the mining rights for this particular area, and it promises billions of dollars in profits, actually belong to a Chinese state-owned company, Sino Steel Midwest. What would your message to the top executives of that Chinese company be?
Preserve the real heritage stuff that we need preserved for future generations of our families to appreciate.
Do you think when they are making their calculations in Beijing and Shanghai, do you think they're really going to listen to an Aboriginal local community leader in Western Australia saying, respect my heritage?
I doubt it. I got no ideas whether they will or not. I don't know. I really don't know.
Does it sometimes leave you feeling pretty depressed?
It does. But I have a good relationship with the Chinese that I've actually been talking to. The Chinese media came out here and we sat in the cave over here and had a chat with Tony, you know.
Tony Chang, who's
he's good.
The boss of Sino Steel.
I got respect for him, he got respect for me, and we actually get on very well. But then there's people that work under Tony. These are the ones we have problems from time to time.
Mm. In your heart, Colin, would you like to see no mining at all in this area of Western Australia?
Well, most Aboriginal people wouldn't like to see mining happen in this area. However, it's the inevitable, regardless of what Aboriginal people want.
So if it's inevitable, and if I were to come back in 20 years' time, what do you think I would see here?
You see big holes in the ground all over the place.
I might also see an Indigenous community, Aboriginal people, who've got a better standard of living.
Overall, there'll be a small number of people who will benefit Aboriginal people out of it.
And the rest?
Nothing.
Colin Hamlet, thank you very much for being on Hardtalk.
You're welcome.
Around the other side of the hill is Sino Steel's exploration camp. They have air conditioning, power showers, and a single-minded focus on digging out the riches underground. This is where you lay out your drill samples. Exploration Chief Dennis Kruger has sampled and tested enough rock to know this is an attractive project, but he has to tread carefully. Wherever you dig, it is going to make one heck of a hole in the landscape.
Big holes. Mm-hmm.
And I suppose the issue then is what it's going to look like if you extract the 200 or 300 million tons of iron ore.
Well, part of the hill's got to disappear because it's hosted within the hill. But there are environmental considerations that come into play. The company can't just go and, shall we say, willy-nilly mine the hill. There's got to be an environmental protection plan in place approved by the government.
It's extraordinarily complicated, isn't it? Because I know these yellow little sections here, in areas where you want to mine, they represent traces found, archaeological remains of Aboriginal life over hundreds of years, and you've got to be very careful about those areas.
We do. Once the company signs the mining agreement with the Wodjiri, we then are, at that stage, we can apply for what they call Section 18 applications. So we apply for that. We will sit down with the Wodjiri, discuss the areas we've applied for. They will give their consent. Yes, we're happy for you to go in there. If there's any disturbance of their sites, the mining agreement allows for compensation for those sites to be disturbed or moved.
Is this going to happen, do you think?
My opinion, yes, it will happen. It will happen, yeah.
It's going to change this place forever.
Yep.
These hills are littered with the archaeological remains of thousands of years of Aboriginal life, but they also contain hundreds of millions of tons of iron ore, and so often money talks louder than history and heritage. Within 20 years, many of these hills will be dug up and their bounty shipped off to China. Mining money has already transformed the city of Perth. Australia now has a two-speed economy, and thanks to mining, Western Australia is in the fast lane. Perth's posh suburbs house the mining millionaires, and in the harbour, more evidence of an economy turbocharged by the commodities boom. China's Sino-Steel is determined to get in on the action. Their Chinese boss wouldn't talk to us, but one of his Australian executives did. Julian Mizera, welcome to Hardtalk.
It's a pleasure to be here.
I have spoken to Colin Hamlet, who is one of the leaders of the Wodjiri community. He's very worried. I mean, he's worried because there have been instances where you at Sino-Steel have made promises to him which he says have not been kept.
Well, if you can quote some examples, I'd like to know where they are.
Well, there's a couple of drill sites on the current exploration field, W6 and W20, where he says, he said to your company there were important sacred relics, historical, archaeological significant sites that he wanted to see left alone. A promise was given, but drill operations ultimately were conducted in those sites against his wishes.
The examples I think you're referring to occurred some years ago.
2 years ago.
Two and a half years ago. We've only just detected some of these things based on some recent activity where we've observed this.
Was it a mistake?
I
mean, can you say to people like Colin Hamlet that won't happen again?
Look, we have put processes in place now that we have put those processes in place in consultation with the Wodjiri people. They're very comfortable in terms of how we operate in the area now. There is multiple safeguards in place now to ensure that we do not impact any areas of significance unless we have the consent of the Wodjiri.
Are you saying to me that in the end the Wodjiri people have a right of veto when it comes to the way in which the Weld Range is mined?
Under our current agreement with the Wodjiri, that is correct.
You work for a Chinese company, actually a company owned by the Chinese state, and I believe this is one of the first ventures in Australia which is entirely Chinese owned and operated. There are many Australians a little uncomfortable about that. Can you understand why?
Look, I understand the argument and some of the concerns that have been raised. Sino-Steel is a state-owned enterprise. It's owned by the Chinese government.
Your bosses, in effect, are in Beijing.
Correct.
And they don't give a hoot, let's be honest, about the Aboriginal culture of Australia.
To be perfectly honest, I think you're absolutely wrong. We have very senior delegations from right across Sino-Steel Corporation. In fact, we had the president out here just 2 months ago who visited Weld Range amongst other areas. President Jha, the president of the company, is intimately concerned with our environmental impact, the health and safety of our employees, and the heritage issues that we face as challenges. Are intimately aware and are absolutely committed to making sure that we do this right.
The vast Sino iron mine in Australia's far northwest is rock-solid evidence of a new economic reality. China is the world's biggest engine of growth, and there is plenty more digging to be done. This swathe of untouched territory in the Pilbara region is said to contain 160 billion tons of magnetite iron ore. The mining rights belong to one Australian billionaire who says when it comes to this mining boom, you ain't seen nothing yet. Clive Palmer, welcome to Hardtalk.
Thanks a lot.
For the last decade, Australia has been in the middle of an extraordinary commodities boom. Do you see any end to it?
What it's about really is that 400 million Chinese moved from the countryside to the city because they wanted a better lifestyle. The government wanted to give them a better lifestyle and they wanted to have a better life for their children. If we look at the 5-year plans of the Chinese Communist Party, we see right up to 2030, another 350 million additional Chinese are moving from the countryside to the city to become a middle class. And that's a metal intensive period. You need more houses, you need more toilets, you need more piping, and that's as many people as there are in North America who are maybe moving out of the cities into the trailer parks, people say.
So from the get-go, you have tied your fate and maybe your country's fate to what's happening in China.
Well, changes to the marketplace, changes to the world. We've seen those changes take place with the last financial crisis. Most of the world's capital now that's available for large project developments above $5 or $6 billion resides in the People's Republic of China. If I go to London, I won't be able to raise that much money. If I go to New York, the banks haven't got it. And yet they're the people that have got the demand that need the resources. Australia's got the resources, and the other people also have the resources. Fortunately, geographically, we're closest.
The enormity of your wealth is almost beyond my imagination, because you've only just begun to almost literally scratch the surface of that. You're already a dollar billionaire. Some people reckon you're already Australia's 5th wealthiest individual. So how far can this go?
Well, certainly the banks and other people never calculate the wealth of tonnes in the ground. They look at tonnes being extracted and the revenue being earned when they look at your wealth. But certainly as far as tonnes in the ground, we've got an enormous amount of coal and iron ore. In the Gailey Basin in Queensland, the estimates, we've got nearly 100 billion tonnes of thermal coal. We're developing the first billion tonnes with the Chinese at the moment.
I mean, they talk about the Russian oligarchs.
Yeah.
It seems to me you sit here in Australia as an Aussie oligarch.
Well, hopefully I'm a nicer guy than that. And hopefully what our wealth and what we can get, we put to good purposes for the community. And in Western Australia, we've got a $100 million trust set up for Aboriginals and for medical health. And this year we donated $6 million to the Duke of Edinburgh Awards for Australian youth. We run a soccer team. So I don't see me of having very much wealth at all. If God gives you a job on earth, gives you the access, and ability to control a lot of wealth, you've got to use it for the benefit of the country and the people that in the community, I think.
Let's get back to China. You began by telling me the potential growth that still remains in China. You've made it your business for years to get inside the Chinese government and the Chinese economy. How have you done that?
Well, I think basically the Chinese people are a very friendly people, and a very casual people, and they're human beings like all of us. I guess the first thing we have to do is, often when you see people from the West going to China, they're talking at Chinese people, not with them. They're not having a conversation. They're not recognising what the other person's point of view.
You've actually bought a home in China. You've established a very big and indeed a personal base inside the country.
Yeah. Well, I certainly love the Chinese people and what they've achieved.
Well, you love their money.
Yeah, no, I love what they're
you don't. I mean, you're politically in Australia. You're known as as a man of the right.
Yeah.
You rail against socialism, and here you're saying to me you love China and the Chinese people.
Sure.
You just want their money. You don't like their political system one little bit.
We're at different stages of development.
You're doing deals with the Chinese which have them come in with the billions of dollars to build railways, to build port infrastructure, and to sign on to taking all of your coal and iron ore for 20 or 30 years.
And what that does is give us $4 or $5 billion of exports for Australia. It helps our balance of payment, supports the dollar, and creates tremendous employment. So all of those things are positive for our country.
You do use your wealth, don't you, to try to wield some political power in Australia?
Well, I've always been interested in politics before I got any money, really. I used to work at the National Party. I was the state director of the, when Sir Jokey Peterson was Premier, I was the state director of the party spokesman. So.
But do you think it sits easily with Australians that here you are, one of the richest men in the country, and you can, as you did, give $700,000 direct to the Liberal Party to help them fight the recent general election? You and many other miners clubbed together to give more than $20 million to the anti-super tax campaign. You're basically, in some ways, distorting the way in which Australian politics works with your mining money.
Well, if you look at how much money the Labor Party had from the unions, you'd see they had nearly 3 times that amount of money. And the reason that we gave that was because we think in democracy you need to have a level playing field so that all views can be heard. And even people who've got billions of dollars that are citizens of the country are entitled to have their views heard too. So just because I'm wealthy doesn't mean I don't think.
No, but
it doesn't mean I haven't got the right to be heard.
It raises some serious questions. Kevin Rudd, who felt the brunt of your political money, he called the big mining interests, quote, big, muscly, and from time to time, ugly.
Well, I'd have to agree about the second part about last being ugly. I've never been very attractive.
I'm not sure that's the point he was making.
I don't know whether I'm very muscly, actually. I'm probably quite the opposite. But look, I feel sorry for Kevin Rudd in that context, you know. He was a casualty of his own policy. He was in political life. He came out with a policy. The community decided they didn't want it, and he was dumped by the Labor Party.
But the point is, you talk about the potential you've got as a coal producer to send 20, 30 million tonnes a year to China. You don't have to dig that coal out of the ground. There are many people who would say the best thing to do with that fossil fuel is to leave it in the ground. It's the only way we can even get close to doing what the scientists say we have to do to control the warming of our planet.
Well, I don't think that would make much of a difference. The coal would still be got from some other mine on the planet for those particular power stations that need it in China. And
that's just avoiding any sort of responsibility at all.
But let me say secondly, but the reason that we dig out the coal is because it'll provide 7,000 jobs for unemployed Australians, that project in particular. And that'll provide happier Christmases for their children and their family than they'd otherwise have. Now, I don't know if you've ever been unemployed. I have. And I've had kids who've been unemployed, not being able to afford to buy them a Christmas present. It's a pretty sad situation. But I do think it's important that we have the development in Australia, that we have socially, we have people that can have the opportunity to support their families. And that's all we're trying to do.
I just wonder whether your vision for Australia is a truly sustainable vision.
I don't know, but all I can tell you is that, you know, you can only sleep in one bed, you can only eat one meal a day, and if you're smart, you'll only have one woman in your life. and that's my life at the moment. It doesn't matter whether I've got $10 billion or I've got $10. That's how I live. And it really, you know, after having about $5 or $10 million, to have anything more than that in your life is too much, you know. And I don't look at it as my property or my inheritance. I look at it as a trust that God set up for the people of this country, and I'm just administering it while I'm here on earth.
Clive Palmer, thank you very much indeed for being on Hard Talk.
It's been a pleasure. All the best.
Thank you very much, Clive.
Yeah.
Soon the Weld Range will bear the scars of a vast mine. China will suck up the iron ore, Australia will pocket a tidy profit. In the short term, everybody wins, and in the long term, well, that's a story yet to be written in the rock.